mess around with some things, but it looks like it started working now, so that's good.
No, we're good. Okay, as long as we can hear each other, we're cool.
Yeah, that's the important thing. If push comes to shove, I'll just use my phone. So,
Same here, same here. But I do appreciate you doing this for me, David. Really means a lot to me.
You're welcome.
So real quick, I did not know of this movie that you're in. We're going to mention this here in just a second, but I am a fan of Chris Jericho, and that's one of the reasons I'm doing this podcast. And I always listen to Talk is Jericho, right? And
right.
It was this guy, and the title was like Art the Clown, yada yada yada. And I was like, well, what is this? And then you started listening to it. It was like Terrifier, and I was like, well, I think Netflix has it. I'm gonna go watch it. So David Thornton is here, and that was probably the longest intro I've done. But he is, and I'm kind of nerding out here a little bit just because I'm such a fan of this movie. He is known as Art the Clown in the horror film Terrifier and Terrifier 2, which we will talk about. That's what he's here to promote, the second Terrifier. So thanks, man. Appreciate you doing it for me, dude. Really do.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Very happy to be here, man.
Hope I don't nerd out too much on you on here.
It's okay. I'll forgive you. I've been nerding out a little bit on my own Facebook page just for the past hour or so because I made a post with Animaniacs and Rob Paulson started commenting on it. I'm like, oh my god!
Wow, man, talk about a show of its time that nobody ever realized it was great until it was over with.
Oh, I know. Oh, I realized it was great back then though, but no one else was listening to me. It's like, why are you watching? I was in I think middle school or high school at the time. So people are like, why are you watching cartoons? Like, no, you guys don't understand. This is hilarious.
Yeah. Did you hear they're bringing it back? I don't know if that's what you were posting about on Facebook. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So are you nervous that they're going to bring that show back, meaning that it meant so much back in the day, or are you kind of excited?
Oh, I'm excited because they've got the original team involved with it. All the writers, the actors, everybody involved in it. So I'm like, so it's gonna be good. So I have total faith in it. So I'm stoked.
So I see you're sitting behind a chalkboard.
No, it's just a weird paint job like one of my old roommates did in this place. Yeah.
Well, I was like, well, that's kind of cool. Wouldn't it be like a teacher or something? But hey, it does from my view look like a chalkboard, which is kind of cool.
I think that's what it was supposed to be, some kind of chalkboard type paint that she wanted, and it just didn't turn out the way she intended. I don't know. It happened before I moved in, so I was like, what is this? And it's like, well, I'm like, oh, okay. But it's funny you mentioned teacher because that was actually my former profession before I went into acting full time.
Really? So what drew you to want to be a teacher?
Well, I was trying to be, pragmatic with my life at the time because, I did want to go into acting, but I was trying to it's like I want to be able to afford, living. So it's like, well, I come from a family of teachers and I love kids and stuff like that. So I was like, I could do this. I could definitely do this. So I got my degree in elementary education, but I decided to change career paths. It was about a year after my mom passed away while I was in college, and I was doing my internship in the schools, and I was not happy. I was going through a lot of other personal stuff in my life at the time, and I was like, well, what's going to make me happy? And I realized one day that I was doing story time with my kids, my students, and I was doing all the little voices for the characters, and I was like, man, I'm getting more fulfillment out of entertaining my students than actually teaching them. I think this is my calling. I think this is what I need to do with my life. And so I decided then, I was like, I'm going to go pursue acting instead. So I finished up my degree and stuff like that, and then I moved to New York.
So can you do a lot of voice work? Because I know you do the Joker and stuff like that, but were you going to I guess Hollywood? I guess that's where you're supposed to go if you're going to be an actor. Is that where you go?
Yeah.
You're like, I'm going to go be a voice actor.
Well, that's exactly what I did. I was at the time I wasn't sure if I wanted to go into voiceover work. At the time I really wanted to do Broadway because I did a lot of musical theater growing up, and so I was like, oh, New York's the place. Plus I knew more people in New York than I knew out in LA, and one of my old friends from college needed a roommate, so it's like, you want to move up here? I'm like, yeah, sure. So I moved up to New York. And then I kind of fell into voiceover acting while I was up here. I took some classes. And I was like, this is I really like doing because that's what I do. It's like I do well over 200 voices. So
Yeah, we and who would know you do the voices, but one of your most celebrated characters would be a silent
oh
character.
yeah, that's the true irony of it all. It's just like because I was really wanted to do stuff for kids and stuff like that. Also because my teaching background, so it's like that's actually what I was starting out doing. I was doing a lot of excuse me, animated series for students up. Well, not really students, but children up here in New York. I did some work on Super Wings, and like the Bravest Night and stuff like that. So and a lot of independent, like not independent, but I would say non-union animated shows that are shown out more in like
Yeah,
Korea and stuff like that, where they're trying to help teach
yeah.
English and stuff like that. So it's funny. I did that all this stuff for children, and now I'm known for being silent and I'm killing people. So I've run the whole gamut
What?
of like career stuff there for an
Yep.
actor.
What was weird for me was earlier, if you're listening to the podcast and not watching the YouTube, then you're not going to see this. But we couldn't get David's mic working over here on Skype, and I was watching him over here in silence, and he had just made this. One second, just it was just one of that finger point. I was like, "Oh wow, here it goes." Got the long fingers, and it was like, "Oh man, this is legit art."
Yeah.
It was one of those weird things where I was like, "Oh, I can see kind of where he puts his own spin and twist on it," because you originally weren't Art the Clown in that
Correct.
what was it, All Hallows Week, what was that called,
All Hallows Eve.
All Hallows Eve. Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
So how did you, let's go into Terrifier, and then we'll back off and we'll just make a full circle.
Sure.
uh if you're cool with that, how did you get this Art the Clown role?
Well, I was actually in a lull in audition time because I had just come back from touring with How the Grinch Stole Christmas, the musical.
Right.
And I was Grandpa Who in that, but I also understudied the Grinch. And our Grinch was Stephen Carl, too, who was Robbie Rotten on Lazy Town, if anybody knows that show. That was on Nickelodeon. It's like, if
That's
you've ever...
that's the guy that he just passed away from cancer, right? Is
Yeah,
that the guy I'm
yeah.
thinking about?
Mhm.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, yeah. But I was in the middle of auditioning. Like I decided to take a few months off just to focus on auditioning, and I was really focusing on trying to get in some more Broadway tours and stuff like that. And I had been in final callbacks for about 4 different tours, and they all fell through for one reason or another. I know, like one of them literally came down to a coin toss. They're trying to choose between me
Mhm.
and another person, and I lost that coin toss. And so I was kind of getting a little bit just like, I'm so close. I keep on getting so close to something big, and it just keeps falling through. And then I saw this notice on a website for actors called Actors Access, and
Mm.
and they were looking for a tall, skinny guy that has clowning or physical comedy experience to play Art. And I had seen All Hallows Eve, so I knew the character. I'm like, are you freaking kidding me? Is this real? I'm like,
Right.
yes, I'm perfect for this. And so I contacted my agents, and I'm like, please, please, please submit me. And this was my first actual big audition for a feature film. I had done some extra work, but that's different. And I'm like,
Yeah, yeah.
so I was like, I had been wanting to get into film work, but that's kind of hard to do here in New York. You really need to be out in LA for that kind of stuff. So I was like, oh, well, this might be a nice foot in the door. If I can get in there, this might lead to other things, because I'm like, oh, it's okay, it's a lower budget independent film, so I'm like, I don't know if it'll be seen by anybody, but I'm like, this would be great just to get experience and get this on my resume, and who knows what this might lead to. And so I went in there, going to the audition, and I didn't have any sides. And I walk in the room, everybody else has got sides, and I'm like freaking out. I'm like, oh no, here I am for my first
Well,
big, huge audition for something like this, and I don't have sides.
okay, hang on just a second. Explain that to people. What is a side, that for
Oh,
those
yeah.
that may not know what it is?
Yeah, sides are the script. Yeah, so like they give you
Okay.
there's like it's different scenes from the full script that they give you, so you can read as the character and stuff like that. And so yeah, so I go in there and I'm like, oh no, I don't have my sides, and I go in, they call me in the room, and I'm like, I am so sorry, I was never given any sides. Is there any way I can get some, and I can just go read over them real quickly, and I'll come back in, and I'll be ready for you guys. And they're like, oh, you don't need any. I'm like, what? Because that's what I'm used to. And they're like, no. Like, art doesn't speak, so we just want you to just improvise a scene where you decapitate a victim, and you're really happy about doing it. I'm like, okay, cool. Can I have a few seconds or a minute or so just to think this over? They're like, no, we just want to see what you can come up with on the fly. I'm like, cool. All right, let's go. And I came up with this scene. I don't know where this came from, in some dark recess of my brain, but I came with a scene where I like cartoonishly snuck up behind my victim and like knocked him out, took out like a hacksaw and sawed off his head, picked it up, tasted it, didn't like the taste, so I take out a salt shaker and start like seasoning it, taste it again, kind of like it, bathe in the blood. Then I kind of like do a little happy dance and skip out of my little merry way, and that's what got me the role.
You know, I see that a lot because, like, I'm a big fan of, like, Whose Line Is It Anyway? And that's kind of how the process is for that. They're just kind of like, okay, you're going to go through these classes, and it's not really classes. You're just showing us what you can do.
Yeah.
And if you're good enough, then we're going to do it, you know, and that's kind of what that reminds me of. But I rewatched this. This is Saturday. I rewatched it Thursday night, just to get a clear visual and remember, because I remember I watched like twice a couple years ago, and I was like, well, here we go, gonna watch it. And I never write questions down, but I have some written right here, just because as I was watching the movie, I was jotting them down because it was plopping out, and I would go and do research on you and just be like, I don't want to ask the same questions everyone asks. That's the point of this podcast, is to just get in between the personal without asking the same questions.
Right.
And so the first one is, in the beginning of the movie, you see, I guess, the humanoid or whatever Art the Clown is of getting dressed, putting his gloves on. And my question is Art deformed? Because you can see a little mirror, or is this going to take place what happens in 2? Because if
yeah, that's
like,
actually.
are they gonna?
Yeah, that's actually the scene you're seeing there is in part 2. That's
Really.
Yeah, that's him a year later, because that's the whole interview. He's watching the interview with Victoria. So that's
Right.
yeah. What you're seeing is most of the film is a flashback.
So all this that you're gonna find out in the second one is kind of his backstory and like years later of everything. Right.
But I see what you're talking about, because you're wondering, because you see me putting on the makeup and
exactly.
Yeah.
And I was trying to get around without saying, well, you look deformed, but no, it's not that. It was just I didn't understood if you know what I mean, like the character itself was deformed, just because it could be like Leatherface or Jason Voorhees, you know. And that's where I find such appreciation with this movie, is because it's going back to the late 80s, because they're taking a virgin girl character, but then they make the twist, that big twist no one ever sees coming. And the person that you see in the beginning is kind of like, oh, wow. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Does that make sense of what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's that we basically pulled a psycho in there too. We killed
right.
We killed off who everybody thought was going to be the main character as well. So just like but yeah, it's like so everybody thought that was going to be her at the end, but actually it ended up being her sister.
Well, I guess probably
the deformed face.
I guess the listeners wouldn't be listening if they haven't seen the movie, I'm guessing, but if you haven't,
spoilers.
Basically, I'm not going to really tell the ending, but basically what this movie's about is these two friends are coming back from, I'm guessing, a Halloween party of some sorts, and then they come upon this clown that they don't know who it is. Turns out it's a killer clown, and he goes on a rampage of killing people.
Yep.
Some of the bloodiest murders I've seen in a long time. But but
Yes.
what gets me is, man, I hate the psychological thrillers that they're coming out with now, like Insidious. I want to see something because when I first watched it, I didn't think the movie itself was creepy. I thought the character art itself was creepy. That's what made the whole movie experience freaky. If
Right.
that's you know what I mean? Like it's just I guess if they had someone else, because I haven't seen the All Hallows Eve, I don't know if that Art the Clown was speaking or whatever. I've just
No.
seen David Thornton doing this, and from where I've seen, I don't think they could have got another person better than you because you're just so comical in your appearance and how you do it.
Well, thank you. Yeah, the original art, Mike Gianelli, was I would say he was less comical than I think I brought more of the, like
Okay,
the physical comedy into the character. He was more serious. He had a little like
right.
playful moments, but he was a lot more serious in my version of art.
My favorite scene from Terrifier is honestly the freakiest scene for me out of the movie would be where I'm gonna call her the alley lady, the lady that's in the alley or the back of the building. I don't really know what her name is, but where you see he's got her skin, he cuts her all the way down, scalps her from head to toe. But to me, it looks like he's Jigsaw from the Saw series.
Mhm.
That's who it reminded me of, and those movies are freaky to me. And it was just like that was the freakiest part to me. So, of this movie, what to you? Because obviously you're the freaky character in the movie, but what was the freakiest scene for you to ever go back and rewatch it? Just be like, oh, that's rough.
I would say it's that scene when you
Okay,
really think about what's going on there. I mean, a lot of people say the hacksaw scene, but that scene itself is I would say they're both equal with each other. I'll comment about that scene first. I call it my Buffalo Bill scene because like he he's wearing his victim's body parts,
right.
and he actually took the time to take off his clothes and wear his victim's body parts just to mess with the
Right.
sister coming in thinking it's her
Yeah.
sister. So she's like, I'm going to just totally just psychologically just screw with her brain right now. And like, it's like that's messed up. I'm like, like he cut off in a because people don't realize it's not just the scalp when and the boobs he's wearing. If you're looking
It's
closely,
head to toe.
he also cut off her
Right.
vajayjay and is
Yeah.
wearing that as well, and that's messed up. It's just like,
Yeah.
oh gosh, no, that's So you have that, but also the hacksaw scene's pretty gruesome too because he's he has the character Tara tied up to a chair. He's messing with her at first,
Sure.
making her think that she's about to die there, and he's
Right.
taking out all these different torture implements. It's like, I'm going to torture you and do all these horrible things to you, and
See,
that's
that
about
reminds
what
me
it.
of Scream,
Mhm.
like Ghostface, because he would do that all the time, and
Yeah,
that was kind of going back to the '80s movies.
yeah. But he's making her think that he was going to use all those on her, when in actuality
Sure.
he was going to use all. He was using those, going to use that on her friend that she didn't know was right behind that cloth, and he reveals her and she's naked. But it's not like you have nudity in most horror films or doing it in a
Yeah. Yeah.
sexualized ways.
Yeah.
This wasn't as in a sexualized way. This is more in a way to show how vulnerable she was. He made her
Sure.
as vulnerable as possible in hanging upside down like that and in front of her best friend, probably someone that she had known her whole entire life, and then just proceeds to gut her from just saw her in half, just trying to break her friend, because that's what I think he was really trying to do with Tara's characters, mentally break her down. He really wanted to just break her mentally, and that's really morbid when you think about it. It's like, yeah, how that's I can't imagine someone doing that to one of my friends. It's just like right in front of me in such a manner. I mean, that's horrible, absolutely horrible. That's evil. That is just pure evil. And he's having fun
Yeah.
while he's doing it. That's the thing. Is like he has. That's what I love about this character. It's just like he's doing these horrible, horrible things to people, but he's having a blast while he does it, and he does it because he finds it entertaining. He's like the reverse clown. Clowns do these funny things to entertain other people and bring joy to other people. He does these things not to bring joy and amusement to other people, but to amuse himself,
Mm. Mm.
which is pretty messed up.
So, last question, and we'll dive off Terrifier for a few minutes. What is Art the Clown? Like, if this would be because I was listening to some interviews, and obviously they were talking about Terrifier 2 will be kind of go in Art's background. You'll find out where it came from. So, are we going to find out what exactly Art the Clown is?
Yeah.
Like, is he just a human dressed up, or is he an act? You know what I mean? You see what I'm trying to get at?
I say, yeah. Well, we're not going to fully address all of that because we don't want to just
Right.
give away everything all at once. I mean,
Sure.
it's fun leaving a lot of mystery behind it, but we do address the supernatural aspects of his character in this film. That takes a big precedence, I would say. But we don't do it like, oh wow, he can like levitate and command things with his mind, stuff like that. No, we try to still keep it kind of grounded in a way, and there's a reason for it all. So we're exploring that bit of the character. But I'm like, yeah, there is. I will say that he's something more than human now.
Sure.
I mean,
Has to be.
a human can't just come back from shooting his brains out.
Blowing his brains out.
Yeah, and you can see it in the trailer too. That we still show that like you see in one clip where you see the head wound still there in the back of his head, where his brains were blown out. So it's like, yeah, there's something special going on there. So he's not entirely human now.
Did you have some like hero aspects or comedy aspects when it came to the role of Art the Clown?
Oh yeah.
I kind of see like Robin Williams, maybe a little Jim Carrey thrown in there a little bit.
Oh yeah, there was a lot of that. I mean, I grew up watching a lot of great physical comedians. That was always something I really loved doing because I did a lot of children's theater growing up, and kids are more into the physical comedy than they are the verbal comedy, and so I love doing slapstick and all that kind of stuff. But I based art on a lot of those guys like Chaplin, Buster Keaton, Harpo Marx, Rowan Atkinson, Mr. Bean.
Right.
Jim Carrey, Doug Jones, I think is a fantastic physical actor. It's like a lot of people don't realize they've seen Doug Jones in movies because they're not used to seeing what he actually looks like. But he's usually all these amazing characters with all his, these great creations. Like Pan's Labyrinth. The Pale Man, and that is just like, oh gosh,
Doug Jones. I think he did a show back when I was young called I don't know what it was called, but they had eyes on their hands and they talked with their hand. Like I don't remember what. I think Doug Jones did. It was on like Nickelodeon or something.
Oh, I think I know what you're talking about. I wouldn't be surprised if he had something to do with that. He's an amazing physical actor, so he was a great inspiration. But also my friend Stefan Carl. I mean, I would say he had a big inspiration because I had just come off of doing Grinch for 5 years, so I was so used to his style of acting and emulating what he did because when being his understudy, I learned a lot about all that from him and took a lot of what he taught me and put that into art as well.
Well, is it cool if we talk about the Grinch because I want
Sure.
to know how did you get the role of Grandpa Who and also the understudy of the Grinch? But did you always, because you said you've always been in plays and musicals since you were little, so was it a dream to be like a musical like off of Hamilton or something?
Oh yeah, it was a total dream of mine. Like Grinch is my first big huge like break.
Right.
The audition process was grueling. I had to go in for several callbacks and everything for that. And I was originally, because Stefan had already been playing the Grinch. He had played it. I was in the first tour of it, but they had done sit downs in like L.A. and Boston like the 2 years before, and Stefan had been playing the Grinch, so they need some guys that could be his understudies. They have 2 understudies for the Grinch because it's such a physically and vocally demanding role. They just want to play it safe. And so it was me and another guy, and I was in there so much going in for those auditions. It was a lot of fun though, but that's where I was able to really bring in a lot of my physical comedy into it. And so I originally, when I was doing Grinch, I was the understudy for Grandpa Who and Grinch, and because originally they didn't want to have one of the main characters also understudying the Grinch, so they had me as Grandpa, as Grandpa's understudy as well. And so I did like my first 3 tours as the understudies for both of those characters, and then they booted me up to Grandpa for my last 2 tours, which was a lot of fun. I had so much fun doing that.
And I'm curious here, and I like to get not too personal, but a little like when I picture musicals or like I'm a play writer. I do this. I act in plays. I'm an understudy. I picture it kind of like a scene out of Friends, where Ross and Rachel, they were all going to the play, and it was this underground dome. But and how is the pay for like a Grinch musical versus something you would see at underground subway? Obviously, it's
Oh yeah.
dramatical, I would bet.
Oh yeah. I'll say we were a non-union tour, so we weren't getting paid as much as the unions pay. But I
Okay.
mean, I was still I was making about 1,000 a week plus per diem. So I was making about 1,400 a week before taxes, obviously. So it wasn't bad at all, considering at the same
Yeah.
time I was waiting tables and I was making like 400, 500 a week on a good week. So it's like, oh, this is great.
And
But
is doing what I love.
yeah, exactly. It didn't feel like work at all to me. It was just fun. I get to go on stage and be goofy and silly for a few hours. So I'm like, this is fantastic. It's living the dream. So yeah, but like the union tours pay even more than that. So, and it depends on what characters you play. Like when I started playing Grandpa, they upped my pay grade and stuff like that.
So I'm curious. We're in the middle. We're about 5 or 6 months into this pandemic. They call it coronavirus. Obviously,
Yeah.
everybody has heard of it. What do you think is the state of movies in 2021? Forget 2020. Nothing's coming out this
Oh,
year.
nothing's coming out this year.
Unless I mean, unless it's like on demand, nothing's coming to theaters. Nobody's going to see anything. Nobody's going to concerts.
Yeah.
How do you think they're going to? Because well, maybe I should ask this first. Were you filming Terrifier 2 during the pandemic, or did you stop production? How did that?
We were almost finished. We were
Okay.
very, very, very close to being finished. Luckily, we finished our biggest set piece in the film literally the week before we had to go into lockdown. So that was great. We're like, phew, the hardest stuff is done. So we've basically just had to film a few little pickups here or there, but we've had to wait until they opened up New York again. Now we're in like the 4th stage of reopening. So, and they've allowed production to start up again. So they've done some filming, some pickup scenes and stuff like that recently. So we're almost done now.
So, with that being in mind, how do you feel the production companies or even the movie studios? How do you think they're going to take bringing filming movies back? Because let's just say this is over December. They're like, okay,
Yeah.
we're going to make sure it's out in January. We're going to start filming back February. Everybody,
Yeah.
what do you think the proper precautions they're going to take in order to make these movies in 2021?
Well, it's definitely because SAG has put a lot of like precautionary measures now in place for that you have to abide by on sets, and it's ridiculous. It's like it's really hard to do this now. It's like you have to have testing 3 times a week. You have
Yeah.
to have a medical professional on set at all times. They want like crews separated into different smaller units, and so the whole unit can't be on set at the same time because they try to limit as many people they can on set. So it's much different. It's much harder, and it's even more expensive now to do it. I think it's really going to kill a lot of the independent film industry because the demands are just so tough. It's they're going to lose a lot of
Right.
independent films that are usually SAG. So I don't know. It's a scary prospect at the time. It's really hurting this industry big time. It's not just like like the film industry, stage Broadway has been decimated by this because no one can do any Broadway tours or shows right now.
Right.
Which is, so many of my friends are jobless right now because they were doing shows on Broadway where they were touring. Like my friend Corey was the genie in the Aladdin tour, and he had been doing this for years. He had been the understudy for Genie, and now he had finally been promoted to being full-time Genie, and they had to cancel that tour. And I'm like, oh, you got to be kidding me. And I mean, the funny thing was, like, right before we started filming Terrifier 2, I was approached to play Willy Wonka in the tour of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory.
Wow.
And I couldn't do it because we were filming Terrifier at the same time that they were supposed to go into start rehearsals and going on the road with it. And it lucked out. Well, for me, like, good thing I didn't take that because I would be without a job there too. Because they had they were maybe like 2 or 3 months into the tour and they had to cancel it. That's happened to so many people. It's horrible. It's absolutely horrible. So, that's why I'm hoping we can get over this thing as soon as possible. So, this industry can go back to where it is, because like people don't realize how much all of us really rely on the entertainment industry to get by. I'm like,
right.
All of us have been stuck home these past few months. What have we been doing? We've been watching movies. We've been watching TV shows. We've been playing video games. All this. It's like the entertainment industry is usually the saving grace during these hard times. That's how people, mentally got by during the Great Depression, was movies. And that's how people are getting by now. Was you have to have some kind of distraction. And so it's like, that's why I don't think people understand how truly important this industry actually is for like the mental welfare of the people. So it's like I'm hoping we can get back to where we were soon.
I'm curious because I have saw the Lion King the musical, and I am one of them people that I'm going to watch like the Lion King musical. It's going to be exactly like the Lion King movie. I want it to be that way. But and then obviously the Grinch is the same way. It's a different story. So was it harder to know the story of the Grinch and then go into this musical thinking, maybe it's going to be his heart grew 3 times the size at the end of it? But
right. Well, the thing, because a lot of people, when they think of the Grinch, they think of the Jim Carrey version of it, that movie.
Yeah,
and that's something
which was terrible, by the way, in my opinion.
But that's the thing. It's like the focus on the Grinch musical is not to make it like the movie. They want to make it more like the actual book, and that's what's really cool about the show. Is like all the aesthetics, all the set pieces, everything are straight from the book.
Right.
All the color scheme of the whole entire everything is all just how it was in the original book, where everything is pink, red, black, and white. Those are the only colors you see on stage, other than the Grinch, and that makes him stand out more because he's green. That's the one green thing you get. Even the Christmas tree are black and white. It's all, and they're taken straight from the book, which was really cool. So that was the whole focus, is like make it like the book, but we flesh it out a little bit more. But we bring Cindy Lou's family more into it. Like her father and mother and her grandparents and her siblings. But it's a fun music. It's a wonderful musical. I love it. That's why I did it for 5 years. I absolutely love that musical.
Now, are you guys actually singing on stage, or is that like a pre-taped thing they're playing and you're lip singing to it?
No.
Just curious.
No. we had a live orchestra, and we had we all sang live on stage. That's one thing I absolutely despise when I see. I think it's lazy.
Right.
I hate seeing canned orchestras. There's nothing like a live orchestra to me, and there's so many great talented musicians out there, and they should be allowed to tour with these productions, I think. Because I have seen several Broadway tours when I was living back home in Alabama, and they didn't have a live orchestra. They had it all just pre-recorded. and that doesn't work because things can go wrong on stage, and it's just like when you have a live orchestra, they keep up with you. You play off of each other, and so yeah, and plus singing live, like that's one of my biggest pet peeves too, where like not just on musical theater but like concerts when musicians go out there and they lip sync their whole entire freaking concert. I'm like, no, that's I'm sorry, but no. If people are paying hundreds of dollars to come see you perform, you better damn well perform. And I know some of them are like, oh, it's hard to sing. I'm like, yes, and that's why you're paid what you are to do that, because it is hard, and you have to be trained to be able to do this. And it's like I look at Stefan when he was doing Grinch. I mean, the voice he was using for the character was this gravelly, deep voice, and he would do 12 shows sometimes in a week, sometimes 4 shows in one day, and he was still doing it. He hardly ever called out. So that's how it is. Like, truly talented professionals can perform, and they will do that. They will do 8 shows a week. And so, like, hearing like someone like, oh, I don't perform in my concert because it's hard. I'm like, yeah, it's hard. But, you have all these people on Broadway that do 8 shows a week, and they are belting their heads off, and they do it. And they're dancing and singing at the same time too, which is hard to do as well. You have to have a really good breath support to be able to do all of that.
Yep.
And it's like, well, if you can't do it, let the people that are actually talented enough to do it instead. They are the ones that should have the career. But I'll get fascinating
about. No, you're cool. I was really enjoying it. What interests me is you're from Huntsville, Alabama, which is I'm here in Mississippi, which is right across.
Oh yeah,
like hour, maybe 2 hours away.
What part of Mississippi?
What did you find? I'm right between. You're not getting a little small town, but are you familiar with Biloxi?
Yes.
Okay, I'm about 35-ish, 40-ish minutes right outside of Biloxi.
Oh, okay, cool. It must be hot there right now.
Dude, it is. I think it's like 93. And the humidity is just terrible.
That's
you remember.
Oh, actually, New York City is very humid too, because we're surrounded by water. Okay. So our summers here are brutal too. So I thought I was escaping that when I moved to New York, and I was so wrong.
So I was going to ask, what were some of the, besides the population and obviously the city, but what were some of the biggest differences you saw between Alabama and New York? I mean, obviously we could probably think of obvious ones right off our tip of our tongue, but what are some you wouldn't think were the obvious ones?
Well, of course, it's like the big political differences and stuff like that. There's the diversity differences too. It's like that's the thing. Is like New York City is like probably the most diverse place in the world. That's what I think is so cool about living here. It's like you have people from every walk of life living here, every culture, every religion, every race, every creed, every persuasion, and it's really cool. It's like, and it's one of those things where I realized I had prejudices I didn't realize I had when I first moved here, and I'm like, wow, I did not realize I had these prejudices. And that's one of those things where it's like, okay, I got to get over these prejudices, or I'm not going to be happy living here. And I'm like, I got to learn to just embrace the cultures that are here. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. And I did. And I was like, okay, now I'm like, oh, cool. I'm like where I live is over here in Astoria, Queens, is known as Little Egypt. It's a big, it's a large Muslim community here. So I've learned a lot about the Muslim community living here, and it's like a lot of the things that I thought I knew were totally wrong. I'm like, oh, this is really cool. These are my neighbors now. So I'm like, wow, this is, and that's what I love about this city. It's just like you and as an actor, it's great too, because you're able to pick up on so many different types of characterizations and accents. I'm a big accent guy, so I love hearing all the different accents, and I've learned a lot of accents after living here too, which has been very helpful. So there's that. Also for me, which was a big thing, was like growing up in Alabama in the South in general. You walk down the street and you just wave to people and say hi, and
they don't do that here. Who you were.
You don't do that here. It's like back home. It's like it's a total stranger. You still wave at them and stuff like that. And have a good day, you know.
Yeah.
I was doing that when I first moved here to New York. I would be on the subway. I would just start talking to random strangers on the subway, and people are like, "Okay, you're not from here, are you?"
Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of like that. Like I would take it as because I've been to other places. I haven't been to New York, but like the Southern hospitality. Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir. No, ma'am. No. You know,
Yeah.
and how different it is up there in the northern states where it's like they kind of act like they and don't they kind of act like they have like a dickish personality, but
Yeah.
then it's like, well, they would think we do too, just because it's very weird how the cultures are just
Yeah.
so polar opposite and they pull away like the magnets. It's mind blowing to me, but also very fascinating in the same sentence.
Oh, it really is. It really is. It is, and it's funny discovering the ways I've adapted after living here now too. It's like I've just I find out my inner New Yorker comes out when I go back home, and like we're at a stoplight and
Right.
it turns green and people aren't moving, and I'm like, go! It's like just go. Or I'm walking down the street and people are just so slow walking. I'm like, move. It's like, get out of the way, move over. And so those are the things. I'm like, oh wait, no, Dave. Or like I have to stop at a, here in New York, everybody jaywalks because it's like as soon as
Yeah.
you see an opening in the flow of traffic, you go across the street. You're just like, no one has time.
Yeah.
Everyone's like,
And that's weird here because a lot of people don't know what jaywalking is here.
oh yeah.
You know,
Uh,
because and it's because like I've had to learn a lot of stuff just from doing this podcast, which is what I love. It's just like, well, I don't know who has the right of way on a walkway and a stoplight if they're both green. You know what I mean? It's just one of those things. I don't know. I could run over them for all I knew, you know. But
oh yeah.
and that's what's fascinating. It's just coming from the country, or I would much rather. I like the stories that coming from the country to the city, and besides coming from the city to the country, because you're coming out here, you're gonna get very very disappointed.
Oh
There's
yeah,
nothing here
definitely.
but pine trees and cornfields. Up there, you've got everything imaginable. Like
Yeah.
you're coming from here, you're coming from dirt poor. You go up there, you're like, this is the best place I've ever been in my life. But then you come from somewhere like New York and come all the way down here to Wiggins, Mississippi, and you're just like, what kind of hick town am I at?
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's like, oh, like we were filming upstate New York for a lot of this, and it was out in the middle of Amish country, and it was like it
Mm.
took us like 45 minutes just to go drive to the grocery store, and it was like, this is insane. I can't stand this. It's like, but a lot of those areas reminded me of Alabama. Like not Huntsville, but you go outside, like where my cousins
Right.
used to live in Andalusia, Alabama, which is like out in the middle of nowhere. It's like
Nowhere. Nowhere.
the pump fuck country ass Alabama, and it's like it's so funny. It's like, oh yeah, the differences are night and day, and it's just like, yeah, that's what I think is so cool. It's like I've lived in both. It's like things I would talk about that I would do normally as a kid, like going down to my uncle's farm and like being chased by a bull and stuff like that, or going mudding and stuff. And people are like,
Hmm.
what? And like, yeah, I used to go and we like my cousins and I would go out there in the cow pasture. We would pick up cow patties that had like hardened in the sun, and we would throw them at each other like frisbees.
And them things hurt, man.
Yeah.
Those things hurt. You get the right spot,
Oh yeah.
right
That
below the
kind of stuff.
kidney. You,
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. But that's the kind of stuff we would do. It's like build hay forts and playing the hay bales and stuff like that. It's like people are like like a great example of this is like when I was on tour with Grinch. We went to Fort Worth, Texas, to the stockyards where they got all
hmm.
the cattle and
Right.
stuff like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
And some of my castmates are going nuts
They've never
over
seen it before.
cows. I'm like, it's a cow.
Cow.
It's just a cow. I was like, can I pet it? Yeah, you can pet it. It's not going to do shit to you. It's a
That's
big because
yeah. Yep.
they had a thing where you could pay $5 to sit on top of a cow. I'm like,
And they paid it.
they paid it. Like, David, you want to do it? I'm like, no.
No.
I did
No.
that for free growing up. I used to milk things. Like I'm used to just wandering in a field with them, and they're all cool and stuff like that. It's just the bulls you got to watch out for. It's just like,
Yeah,
but
I can imagine. I can just imagine you walking in and just being like, "Well, here I am. I'm back in Alabama. The smell,
oh yeah,
the just you can see the dirt, and it just people are like, "Oh my God, it's a cow!" And you're just like, "We
yeah.
saw these in fenced-in areas every 40 feet." It
Oh yeah.
seems like.
It's so normal. It's like yeah. It's a cow. It's just a cow. They taste delicious too.
Yeah.
Like, and that's what I love is people are like, "Oh, he's so cute and everything. How could you eat him?" Like, because I was
Was
raised
that a
around.
retical question, or do you want
Yeah, it's
recipes?
like yeah, they're sweet and everything, but they're also delicious.
Well,
Circle of
they
life,
are, but
baby.
I have went more turkey based than I have. I'm trying to stick away from red meats a lot,
Mhm.
just because. But yeah, cows they're very delicious.
Yeah.
Um, a few more things here, man. As we're rolling on almost an hour here, just a couple more topics I'd like to talk about if you're down for it. I want to leave Terrifier 2 for the last, just to be the finale of what we're gonna do. So we mentioned Talk is Jericho earlier,
Yeah.
and I bet you knew I was gonna bring this back up. Just being the biggest Chris Jericho fan of all time.
Mhm.
Um, I think I was listening to it the other day, just so I didn't think, oh, I made this question up and it was actually one of his questions or something like that. And you guys were at some kind of like a fan fest together, is that
Yeah, we
right?
were we
Or
were at Days of the Dead in Atlanta. Is a horror
so did
convention.
he just come? So did he just come up and just be like, "Hey, David, want to do the podcast?" Or was it just kind of like, he had to go through management, or you had to go through management?
No,
Because
no,
how
it was
how
literally him. It was so funny too because I'm at my table. I got a line of like fans that I'm doing autographs for, and I just while I'm signing an autograph, I sense someone is just breaking through the line, and I was about to get really mad at someone for doing that. I'm like, how dare you just break in front of all these people in this
now
giant
were you in
shadow?
costume
No, I
signing
was
these
just
autographs?
myself.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
but I had this
Just trying to get
giant.
a visual.
Oh yeah, but it's like so that's happening, and all of a sudden there's this giant shadow just looming over me, and I was about to just like whip up, like, hey, "Sir, you're gonna have to wait." And I'm like, I'm starting up to say that, and I'm like, and it's Chris, and I'm like, "Oh, hey!" He's like, "Hey, Dave, how are you doing, man?" I'm like a huge fan. I was like, I don't want to take up too much of your time, and I'm sorry about breaking the line and stuff like that. It's like, but I'm like, I was just wondering, you want to come be on my podcast? I'm like, yeah, sure. So it's like,
Yeah,
okay, cool. It's like,
yeah.
so like, he's like, I'll have my manager come over and give you my information and stuff like that. Just come up later on and we'll do this. So he's like, I get his information. It was really cool. It's like that night I go up there and I knock on the door. He's like, hey, dude, come on in. Sorry, we're running a little bit late. I'm doing another podcast right now, but you're welcome to come in. And so I'm like, okay. And I come in. It's DDP that he's doing the podcast with. So
Wow.
is sitting in there with Chris Jericho and Diamond Dallas Page doing a podcast together, just watching the two just shoot the shit with each other. I'm like, this is amazing.
Wow.
I'm like, they're like, we're sorry. I'm like, no, you guys keep talking. I'm enjoying this.
Man, I don't even have to do a podcast. Just talk for 3.5 hours.
Yeah,
I will film it on my phone and I will be in heaven.
they were just talking about yoga, and I'm like, this like, and I don't even do
Yeah,
yoga, but
man.
I was fully enraptured to this. I'm like, this is amazing. I'm like, this is so cool. This is so, and they're both just the nicest guys too. Just
Really? That was my next question.
yeah, that's the
Do they,
funny
do
thing
they
about
have that
yeah these wrestlers. Like I've met several of them at these conventions,
right?
especially like Mick Foley and all these guys, and it's just like they're these big, huge guys, but they're biggest teddy bears. They're just the nicest guys in real life. I love them.
And a couple more questions here about that, and then we'll move over to Terrifier 2 and get you on about your day, man. So I'm kind of curious of how he does it, and I don't want to bring him up and make him the spotlight of this. I don't, but when you're doing the podcast, do you have any questions that he hands you, or is he just making them up in his head?
Oh, he was just making them up in his head.
Just
Yeah, we just sat there. We had like beer, and we're just sitting there just shooting the shit. And it was great. And I hated them because I had just gotten over a cold, so I had the residual cough still going on. So I was trying to keep that from coming out the whole entire time. It was like, oh god, I don't want to be coughing like crazy in front of Chris Jericho right now. It's just like, yeah, but yeah, Chris is awesome, dude. He's become part of the Terrifier family now too. So it's just like he and Damien especially talk all the time now.
That's awesome.
So surreal.
Well,
it's so surreal.
It really is so real.
Yeah.
I remember I met Ted DiBiase Jr., the $1 Million Man's son.
Yeah.
And that was the nicest guy. And you just go in there thinking there's going to be like a punk just because they have that wrestling attitude. Like they've all been like, we don't ever have to be nice to you. But then you're like, well, that makes me not want to come up. You know, it's just. But then once you realize, oh, it's all probably all an act. Sure, there's some that are really stuck in the character. But once you realize that, like now you would go up to anybody, I would imagine.
Yeah.
Being with two of the biggest DDP and Jericho.
Oh yeah, it's that's what surprised me. It's like, and it's not just them. It's like all these other horror legends. Like Kane Hodder and C.J. Graham, Bill Moseley. All those guys. And like they're all known for playing these mean, horrible, evil characters, and you would think they would have that kind of persona in real life, but they're just the nicest dudes in real life. I absolutely love getting to. That's what I love about doing these conventions. I get to know these people I've watched in film from all my life, and I get to know them on a personal level and find out what they're really like. And I'd say about 99.9% of the time, they're just great people.
I was looking on your Instagram the other day, and what was cool to me is you follow and are followed by Zach Bagans, which I'm from the Ghost Adventures guy. So you guys kind of have like a Terrifier bond as well, like the Jericho thing?
Yeah, we've chatted a lot. He actually wanted me to come out and do his haunt this past year, but I couldn't do it because I was doing Terrifier at the time. We started filming, so yeah.
Right. Well, man, time has come. Terrifier 2. We're gonna talk about this real quick. Trying to give not a lot. I don't want to give away the whole movie because I want to watch it myself and enjoy it without knowing what's going to happen. But there is one of the bloodiest scenes in a horror movie ever, right? That's what I was told and what I had researched. So what was, without giving any kind of details, what was that like to be just covered in that icky fake blood stickiness?
Well, we actually haven't finished filming the rest of that scene yet, but just starting it out.
Wait, that's mind blowing. So
yeah.
Let me stop you there. I don't want to go down another rabbit hole. I don't want to keep you any longer than you have to be here. So I understand movies aren't filmed from the beginning to the end. They're filmed in different, the middle could be filmed first.
Yeah.
But you can literally stop the middle of a scene and just be like, okay, in 2 weeks we're going to come back and do the last half.
Yeah, because for this one...
That's mind-boggling to me.
Oh, yeah. Well, the reason we're doing that is Damien has to build all the prosthetics for it and stuff like that.
Okay.
Yeah,
that's still mind-boggling.
Yeah, but that's what's so cool about it. But like going into what we've already done with the scene, oh yeah, there's gonna be blood there. But we filmed other scenes too that are extremely bloody. Gross. Just like, oh boy.
Way more. So is Terrifier 2 from the same independent company?
Yes.
Or did you guys get picked up by a studio? Okay, it's still the same independent.
Yeah. We had we had a studio that wanted to pick us up, but they also wanted to have most of the control over the film, and we said no. And plus, they didn't give us the budget. And
that's unfortunate because it's like doing the podcast. So like, hey, you want to come over and sign over here? But here's the thing: you got to write all your. No, I'm not. I'd much rather be independent. Make as little money as possible and still give out great content.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we've been able to do because we've been able to do what we want with it. And so Damien has really been able to just pull all the tricks out of his hat for this. And we've looked at this one, it's like, we might as well just swing for the fences with this and just go full out with everything we have. And we've done that. And it just, I would say like the first scene alone would give us an NC-17 rating. It's just that
the first scene in the second film.
The first few minutes of the film are bloody enough to give us an NC-17 rating.
Wow.
Yeah,
So 10 times more blood than the first film.
yeah. It's just the gore is crazy. Like Damien was editing one of the other kill scenes that's later on in the film, and he said he was getting nauseous while he was editing it because it's just so brutal.
Oh man.
Yeah.
What is there a release date for Terrifier 2? Because
Well,
I think
yeah.
sorry, go ahead. I'm
No,
not trying to interrupt you.
originally we wanted to release in October, but because of the pandemic, that kind of put damper on everything. Because yeah, there's no way, there's no realistic way that we're able to film those last few bits of the inserts and stuff like that, and get it out to just get it edited and then get it out to distribution in time for October. I you know there's
You
no
got a little
way.
under 2 months.
Yeah,
There's no way. Yeah, that's not
yeah,
gonna
that's
happen.
that's just hard. That would take a freaking miracle to pull that off. So yeah, I think we're probably going to release early next year. That's what I'm hoping. I don't know which way we're going to do it because we have to still talk to distribution and stuff like that. I mean, I think Damien's even talking about doing a possible road show with it, kind of like how Kevin Smith did that with the latest Jay and Silent Bob movie.
Jay and Silent Bob, right, right.
Because one thing we didn't want, because we're not sure if it would be able to get like a true theatrical release because of the content.
Right.
We don't know if the MPAA would really allow all that yet. But with doing a road show, we could probably take it to different theaters throughout the country and do screenings that way or something like that, which I think would be fun because this is definitely a film that you don't need to see it just sitting on your couch. This needs to be seen with a big group of people in a theater because it's a big, fun, bombastic film. It's like these are the type of films you need to see with an audience, especially with horror films. Because like those are fun to
Mm.
see with a big group of people. You get everybody reacting. That's what I love about watching the first film with audiences. Is just like the reactions you get with people. It's fun. And
I remember watching the first Terrifier with my mom and my sister because we're big horror film junkies. And I remember that night after the movie had went off, they were like, "Okay, we're gonna sleep in the same bed together. No, you can go to sleep, go do whatever you want to do." They get so freaking terrified. But last couple of questions here. Told them I would throw that in. Last couple of questions. What was the hardest scene to film for whatever reasons you would think for the first film?
oh, definitely the hacksaw scene. That's that's no doubt about that because doing all that stuff with Catherine especially was very difficult because it's very dangerous what we were doing because no one had really done what we were doing there, and she literally had to hang upside down like that for hours on end, but we would only let her hang upside down for about 30 seconds of a time and then would swing her back up. We had a whole apparatus that was built in so that she could like rest.
Wow.
Yeah, but I mean, but that meant that we only had 30 seconds of filming that we could do at a time, so we had to just boom, 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 and edit everything together. And plus, it was a very uncomfortable night because it was about 20 degrees that night in January in New York, and we had no heat in that room. And so I know I
Mm.
was miserable. I know she was definitely miserable because she was, naked and then had all that fake blood all over her and
So I'm
upside
guessing
down.
the
Yeah,
I'm
it
guessing
was.
she was not shaking because she was scared. She was shaking because she was cold.
Yeah,
But that was what made it real. Like she was
yeah,
probably really shaking from the cold, but for the
yeah.
movie, it made it look she was
It
shaking because she was
added
scared.
more to it, so it really worked that way. And I think that was like the one night on set where there was no joking around. Everybody was very serious that night on set because like we knew how dangerous this was, and we knew we also had to get this right. We knew this scene was going to be the scene everybody was going to talk about, so we have to do this right. So there's a lot of pressure.
uh, is Art the Clown the easiest or the hardest role you've had? Because I can imagine where people will say, "Oh, it's easy. He doesn't have to do anything." But then
Yeah,
I can also see, well, no, in actuality, it's hard because if you ever try to do physical comedy, it's very
yeah.
tiring, very exhausting.
It's a little bit of both. I would say it's the easiest for me, like characterization slash line wise, because I don't have to memorize any lines, because I'm used to playing characters that yak their heads off in like large monologues. I've had roles where I've had to have like 2 or 3 pages of monologue, where it's like one huge monologue for like 2 or 3 pages. So it's like, oh Jesus. So it's been easy in that regard, where I don't have to have anything memorized when I go in. I just go on set and I'm like, what am I doing today? And then I just come up with stuff on the spot and like, okay, I'm going to do this, 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 and this, and play around with stuff. So that was easy. But at the same time, it's hard because I'm so used to relying on my voice and words to convey meaning. And now I have to do it all with my physical, mannerisms, my facial expressions, and my body movements. Plus, it's also very physically demanding too, which is like that's something I was really surprised to learn, is like how tiring it can be when you're doing this hours on end, and like it's like a simple like just stab, having to stab into somebody. It seems like, oh, that's easy to do, but then when you have to do multiple takes over a few hours of that, your arm is like, oh. So like I sometimes have days where like it's like the day after filming, my body is in pain. I'm just like, oh
Yeah.
my God, my mom's like, I'm using some muscles I have not used in a while.
Another thing I'm curious about is we see Art use the smile expression a lot. Now, is that like prosthetic mouth, lip, or is that actually you're able to do that? Obviously, it's prosthetic teeth, etc.
Yeah, it's prosthetic teeth, but yeah, I have a very big smile anyway.
Oh,
So
wow! So you
yeah,
can do that. Oh,
yeah.
that's very interesting.
I have a
Okay,
very
cool.
elastic face. It's just like, as you see here, it's just like, I guess it comes because like my dad's side of the family, they have jowls, so it's just like I have a very elastic
Right.
face. But so yeah, I have a big mouth, and now I can actually use that for career purposes.
Well, you can follow David Howard Thornton on Instagram at David Howard Thornton. You can look for Terrifier 2 coming sometime 2021 if the coronavirus stays away. And appreciate it, man.
Oh, thank you for having me. This has been fun. It's like these are some fun, interesting questions I haven't had before. I enjoy it.
Well, see, man, I love doing that because that's the point of this. Because obviously, if I've heard the same answers to the same questions, I would be bored out of my mind. So I can't imagine you taking 30 minutes to just be like, they're going to ask me the same freaking questions. Here we go.
Well, I don't really mind that as much because I look at it how it was when I did shows on stage. It's like, yeah, I have the same script every single day, but it's like it's a new audience, and so like it's new to that audience. So those same questions, they might not have heard it somewhere else, so they're hearing it for the first time. So that's how I treat it. It's like, it's like, yeah, I don't mind answering the same questions over and over again because who knows, there might be new people hearing this for the first time.